How do I communicate better with my kids? How do I communicate better with my parents? How do I, just in my friendships, how do I make sure that I don't hurt some friendships instead of help them because of what I say? You can find out all sorts of different quotes and proverbs and maybe inspirational posters around your office that talk about the power of words and how impactful the things that we say can be on the lives of the people around us, and how much good we can do with our words and our speech, how much damage we can do with those things. People have been inspired, they've been motivated to do wonderful things, amazing things, because of the words that were shared with them. And at the same time, people have been devastated. Relationships have been blown apart. Marriages and families have been decimated because of, or I guess at least at the root of, our speech, what we say, how we say things to each other. Centuries ago, one of the wisest men that lived on this earth was a man named Solomon. And Solomon said in Proverbs, you can look this up in your Bibles, your Bible app, or it's going to be on the screen. In Proverbs chapter 25 and verse 11, Solomon says, the right word spoken at the right time is as beautiful as gold apples in a silver bowl. Now, if I'm thinking of beautiful things in this world, apples and bowls may not be the first thing that come to mind. But if you live in a culture where fruits are not always easy to come by, certain fruits are even more difficult to come by. And you live in a culture in ancient times where gold and silver and those kinds of things, if you had those, obviously you're wealthy. You can get the picture. One of the most impressive and, in Solomon's eyes, beautiful things would be a bowl full of golden apples in some type of silver bowl. But pay attention to what he's saying. As impressive as that is, what is it that is like that? The right word spoken at the right time. And I would even add to that, when you say the right thing to the right person at the right time with the right tone, Solomon says that's a beautiful thing. Now, same guy also had some things to say about words in Proverbs chapter 18. So back up a few chapters to chapter 18. And in verse 6 of Proverbs 18, Solomon says, the lips of a fool bring fighting, and his mouth calls for a beating. I love the way that Solomon words that. Now, have you ever heard of someone, you ever heard someone getting beat up? Or at least mistreated by somebody else, and somebody saying, well, he had it coming. She had it coming. That's what Solomon is saying here. Sometimes the words of a person who's not thinking about the impact their words can have, those words, their lips invite a beating. They had it coming. They're asking for it. It doesn't mean someone's walking around going, hey, would you beat me up, please? I would like somebody to just give me a beating. That's not what he's saying. He's saying sometimes the words that we use and the tone that we use them with and the situation that we use them in, sometimes those things cause someone to immediately retaliate. And quite honestly, we might really deserve it. If your family or your coworkers or your neighbors or your kids or your parents, if they were to describe your way of speaking to people, if they were to describe your speech, would they say your words are like golden apples? Or would they say your words tend to invite a beating? Tend to cause people strife? Tend to cause people to want to retaliate? How would they describe your speech? That's what we want to address this morning. If you're honest with yourself and going, people don't see golden apples when they hear me talk. People don't feel good. They don't see beautiful things coming out of my mouth. They don't feel good about what I had to say. Then let's fix that. Let's do something about that. Because of the power of words, because of how impactful they can be, let's do something about the words that we use. So let's talk about some hacks. Let's talk about some solutions. How can we make this better? How can we do this better? Give me some tips to improve my speech. And I'm not going to go through all the steps of body language and tone and all the things that you learned in speech class in high school, how to make your speech and your speaking style better. What can I do on a daily basis? What are some tips? What are some things I can do to make sure that when I talk to people, it's good stuff that they hear? Let me give you some steps real quick. First thing you need to do, first speech hack this morning, is to know your style. Know your style of speaking. Know what kind of speaker you are. Now, if you were with us several months ago, early in the spring, we were talking about marriage myths, and we were busting some of those marriage myths. Christy and I were up here on stage together talking about communication in marriage, and we talked about two basic categories of speaking style. Now, you know, if you have people who have put a lot of time and effort in studying this, I'm sure there's a lot more different styles than what I'm going to describe to you this morning. But you can boil it down to two categories. There's the thinkers and there's the spewers. And the thinkers, you know, they're the ones that are going to think about what they're going to say. And they're going to think about it, and they're going to think about how you're going to respond to what it is they're going to say. And then they're going to think about how they're going to respond to that. And you can imagine, you know, the famous statue of the thinker. In their minds, they're thinking, okay, if I say this, she's going to respond. No, I don't want to say that. Okay, instead I could say this. And then she'll say this, and then I'll say it. And it's happening in milliseconds sometimes. I'm going through this whole scenario in my mind, and I'm thinking real hard and clear before I say whatever it is I'm going to say. Now, there's good things about that. A thinker is less likely to hurt the feelings of somebody else because they thought ahead of time how this person is going to react before they say it. And when there is conflict, when there's an argument or some kind of discussion going on, this person is more likely to speak from a well thought out place. I have thought hard about how I want to respond to this and how I think we should handle this situation. And I'm not just spouting off things. I've really given some thought to this. I'm going to share that with you. Now, on the negative side, thinkers tend to have a hard time being completely open and honest. They hide things. They hide their feelings sometimes. They hide some things they might even should say because they're so worried about hurting somebody else's feelings. They're so worried about how people are going to react. They just kind of bottle it up. And this person can cause irritation in other people, especially spewers, because they can overthink their response instead of just saying it. Just say what you're thinking. Okay, I will. Give me a second. Now there's the spewers. And if you can imagine, you've seen pictures, maybe even seen firsthand, Old Faithful, the geyser out in the Northwest that just, here comes all, and there's no control over it. It's just, here it comes. That's what a spewer is as far as communication goes. Someone who has no filter, and whatever is on my mind is coming straight out of my mouth. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. On the good side, that person usually doesn't have to worry about transparency. You never have to guess what they're thinking. You never have to guess how they're feeling. They're going to tell you. Often, if there's an issue that needs to be addressed, there's a decision that needs to be made, they can attack it quickly. Let's do this, and let's go, and they're talking it. Let's move, let's go, let's get to action. This person doesn't struggle with keeping things bottled up and pinned up inside. They're going to let everybody know how they feel. On the negative side, sometimes this person can hurt feelings unintentionally. It's not that they're seeking to hurt your feelings. They're just saying whatever's in their mind right now. And you just need to get ready for it. And so sometimes they blurt out things and then have to come back later and go, sorry, I said that. And they're sincere. They really are sorry. They're a spewer. It just came out. I didn't have any control over it. This person, can sometimes say hurtful things and damage relationships that may be irreparable because they didn't filter things ahead of time. Okay? Now, the reason I share, and there's more descriptions of those, but the reason I shared those two styles with you this morning is because neither one of them is wrong. If you are a spewer, God made you a spewer. And if you're a thinker, God made you that way. And there's other factors. There's the house you're raised in. There's all sorts of different issues that go along with that as well, and your personality type and all that kind of stuff. But God made you specifically the way that he made you, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to know ahead of time what your style is. If I know ahead of time that I tend to just spew things out without much of a filter, then I need to work on not necessarily spewing things out immediately. I need to work on becoming more of a thinker, or I need to at least try to think ahead of time, how is this person going to feel when I just say whatever it is that I want to say? Thinkers the same way. I need to know ahead of time. I need to know ahead of time what my style is and know how to best communicate that to other people. When I'm saying something that I really want them to know, really want them to hear, I need to go ahead and say it. I don't need to overthink it. I need to communicate. I need to talk. I don't need to keep things bottled up. I need to speak. David said of himself in the eyes of God, he said in Psalm chapter 139, verse 13, you created me. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Everything, David says, everything about you is how God made you, including the way that you speak, including your speaking style. But knowing what kind of style you have and knowing what your natural style is, that will help you learn to control your speech, if necessary, to control it better. You don't use it as an excuse. You don't sit there and just berate someone and go, sorry, I'm a spewer. It's not an excuse. It's just something to understand about yourself and recognize what might need to change because of what your natural tendency is. Does that make sense? You want to get better at the words that come out of your mouth? Know what kind of style speaker you are in the first place. Know where the problem areas are. Know where the things are that you need to work on. Number two, every once in a while you need to use some salt. I'll explain that a little better in a second, but you need to use some salt in your speech. Among other things, all sorts of different spices and things that there are in this world, people use salt to make things taste better. I mean, if you've ever sat down to dinner and had some vegetables that had no salt added to them, it's just horrible. It's awful, right? I know vegetables are bad in the first place. Okay, but then there's no salt. That's just even worse, right? You add salt to make things taste better. You don't want them to be bland. You want them to have some flavor to them. There are times when this other person I'm talking to may not want to hear everything that I have to say. I may have the right to say it. I may be completely accurate in what I'm saying. That person may really need to hear what it is that I'm sharing. But they won't hear it, or they won't pay attention to it, they won't do anything about it because of maybe the tone that I'm saying it in. Maybe the attitude that I'm saying it with. Maybe the body language that I have while I'm saying it. Maybe the words that I'm using. Maybe the volume that I'm saying it with. Whatever it is, they're not hearing it or they're not letting it sink in. They're not actually listening to what I'm saying because it doesn't taste good. It doesn't feel good to hear what you're saying in the way that you're saying it. And so in those moments, sometimes I need to use some salt. The Apostle Paul says in Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6, let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Now, Paul is talking in the context here of us having conversations about our faith. And when people talk to us about Jesus, when we talk to other people about Jesus, about what he's doing in our life and about why we serve him as our Lord, that we don't need to come across as, I love Jesus and Jesus loves me and I'm going to heaven. And unless you do something different, you're going to hell. People going to listen to that? Well, if they do, they're going to have bad things. You're inviting a beating. Remember what Solomon said earlier? People do not want to hear that. And they're not going to pay attention to it. Why? Because it's not seasoned with salt. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't taste good. Paul says when you talk about your faith, season it with salt. Don't lie about it. Don't manipulate. Don't be insincere. But be full of grace. I serve Jesus. And the reason I serve him is because he loves me. And I know me. And I know all sorts of reasons not to love me. And he loves me anyway. People want to hear that. People like to hear that. The same principle that Paul is talking about here in conversation about our faith apply to all sorts of conversations that we can have. When you're talking to your spouse about some things that are going on that you need to make a decision about, or some conflict that's going on, use some salt. He never listens to a word I say. How good do your words taste? How pleasant is it to hear what it is that you're saying? She never listens to me. She never does what I tell her to. Would you? If you were being talked to in that tone, if you had that body language, use some salt. Even if you have the right to say it, make sure that you say it in a way that the person you're talking to wants to hear it. Same applies to coworkers. Same applies to your kids. Same applies to your parents. Sometimes the reason that this conflict or this discussion keeps going is because nobody likes what the other person is saying. It doesn't taste good. Use some salt. Use some kindness, some compassion, some grace in what it is that you're saying. Number 3, stop when necessary. Sometimes the best way to improve our speech, the best way to improve our words, is to stop talking. You don't always have to say everything that's on your mind. You don't always have to criticize. You don't always have to judge. You don't always have to make a sarcastic comment. That's a difficult one for me. You don't always have to retaliate when somebody says something negative to you or negative about somebody that you care about. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 23, Solomon says, those who guard their mouths and their tongues keep themselves from calamity. Those who guard, those who stop talking when they need to stop talking, keep themselves from a whole world of trouble. Every summer, a bunch of kids from this church and other churches in the area go to Green Valley Bible Camp over on the east side of Rogers. I've been a part of that camp as a camper, a counselor, or a director for over 30 years. When I was in high school, I used to go to the high school retreat. And there's this one, the first year that I went, I was a sophomore in high school. And that Saturday night, it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing. And that Saturday night, it rained really good. And Sunday morning, we're having worship in the pavilion. And the camp looks a little different now, but the trail, there's some actual steps there now. But the trail that used to go from the boys' side of the hill where all the cabins are down to the worship area, to the pavilion area, it used to just be dirt and rocks. And as you got close to the bottom, it was really big rocks, like kind of boulder kind of things that were sticking up out of the ground. And if you did it just right, you could be going at a pretty good speed and kind of, it's almost like skiing through. You kind of, step on this rock and jump over this one and work your way down pretty quickly. Well, it's worship time. And I wanted to look really good for a girl that I've been flirting with all that weekend and was going to sit by her during work. Why are y'all laughing? Was going to sit by her during worship time. I'd sprayed on my Polo cologne. I had on a button-down shirt and nice jeans. I was looking sharp, man. But I was late. And they were getting ready to start. I knew they were, and so I'm hurrying. And it had been raining, and it was wet and muddy. And I'm going down this trail, and I'm moving, and about halfway down, I'm pitching forward just a little bit. But I'm thinking in my mind, I got this. I know exactly where to step. I know, and so my feet are kind of moving a little too fast. I'm losing my balance, and I step, and my feet go right out from under me. And I slide, the rest of the way down to the bridge right beside the pavilion where everybody was sitting, facing that direction. So I come sliding down, and everybody's like, ooh. Ah, ha, ha. Everybody starts dying laughing. And my whole right side, from my ear to my toes, is covered in mud. And I went in to kind of, paper towels and stuff to get that off the best I could, and came back out of the bathroom, and someone else was sitting in my seat next to that girl. But anyway, that's beside the point. The reason I share that story with you this morning is because I got moving too fast. I got moving too quick, and the rocks were slick, and I thought I could make it. I thought I'll just keep going. And I should have stopped. The first moment that I started realizing this is not going to end well, I should have stopped right then. And I didn't, and it created a much bigger mess because of it. And in a way, I described what happens to a lot of us in some of our conversations, haven't I? We got stuff on our mind, and we're talking, and we're saying things, and we should probably stop sometimes before we say the things that are hurtful, before we say the words we shouldn't say, before we do any more damage. And we don't. And we keep going, and calamity follows. People are hurt, relationships, friendships are ruined because I should have stopped. I should have held on. I should have hit the brakes. We don't have to make the sarcastic comment. We don't have to judge. We don't have to criticize. We don't have to gossip. We don't have to keep repeating what somebody else has repeated to us. We should stop because we may be doing a lot of damage. I want to show you a quick video clip of how we tend to rationalize sometimes the speech that we're using. And then we'll wrap up in just a moment.
There you go. Julie, Eunice and I are so glad you could join our prayer group. Lord knows we need prayer now more than ever.
Amen, sister. Barbara and I just love to lift the needs of others up in prayer.
Well, I appreciate your invitation.
Well, enough of this chitter-chatter. We got to get this show on the road. Now, I don't know if you've heard, but the Hendersons are in real need of prayer. Tom Henderson lost his job.
Did you see Tom Jr.'s haircut the other day? He had the worst haircut. It looked like a porcupine on Red Bull.
I hear Tom Sr. spends all day on the computer, looking at the internet, watching videos on the YouTube.
That's probably why he got fired.
Oh, no. His boss caught him on the surveillance camera playing Texas Hold'em.
Hold them accountable, I say. I mean, it's one thing for housewives like us to have hobbies, but he is a man of the church. He has a family. He should know better. You know, I would like to lift up Verna Carlson.
Oh,
She has not been feeling very well.
what's wrong with her?
Well, I heard it was her weight, 5 pounds in 1 week.
More like 15. Someone needs to tell her that eating ice cream will not save her demonic children.
Oh, don't we know it? That little Jeffrey almost ruined the service the other day, singing at the top of his lungs for all the world to hear.
So wrong.
I have a prayer request. The Whitmans are going back to Peru for a month to build houses.
Oh, they work so hard over there in that poor country. That's a good prayer request.
They're such a nice couple. And her apple pie was the hit of the bake sale.
Oh, yeah, but what about that V-neck sweater? I mean, if it had been any lower, well, I just didn't think that it was becoming.
I noticed that too. I didn't want to say anything.
And let's not forget the dress that she wore last Easter.
I noticed that too. I didn't want to say anything.
I have another prayer request for us because we're just sitting here gossiping, and I was thinking that, you know, we shouldn't be tearing down our brothers and sisters. We should be edifying them and lifting them up. And like, I thought her sweater looked very nice on her, and that Easter dress was an heirloom that her grandmother made. And Tom, he didn't get fired. He quit his job so he could start a design company. And Verna has a glandular problem. And I was just thinking that Romans 1:29 says that gossip is the same as murder.
Murder?
So we should probably pray for ourselves.
Well, I guess you're right.
We should know better.
Yes, we should.
No, I do it too. I mean, last week at the picnic, I told everybody that Betty's son was going to jail, and I found out he's going to Yale.
Well, I don't know what happened to us.
You know who's really bad at gossip?
Who?
I'm glad you're laughing. Because I bet there's some of us, myself included, going, oh, I think I've done that before. And in those situations, even when gossip is happening, even when somebody is sharing information, you don't even know if it's accurate or not. That's a good time to just stop. I don't need to keep going forward. I don't need to keep this gossip train moving. Just stop. Sometimes we need to stop sharing the words that we want to share or feel like sharing. Last thing quickly. Last speech hack. We need to be concentrating on building and not burning. We need to concentrate on building and not burning. This past week, I know we've been focusing a lot on all the devastation that's taking place in the Houston area and Louisiana with all the flooding that's been going on. And you may not have even realized that there are wildfires going on right now over on the West Coast in California and in Oregon. And there are miles upon miles of forests and even buildings and homes that are being destroyed because of wildfires. Trees that have been growing for decades are nothing but ash or nothing but the charred remains of what used to be. Homes and businesses that took months, maybe even years to build have been destroyed within a few hours or less. That's what fire does. It burns up and it destroys what takes a long time to build. It destroys it like that. And that's the comparison that James makes in the book of James to this right here. He says in James chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. James says your tongue is powerful and it's dangerous. A little spark at some point set off those wildfires that are destroying acres of vegetation and buildings on the West Coast. It didn't take long for it to start. And look how much got destroyed because of it. And James says your tongue does the same thing. Your tongue is a tiny part of your body, and yet it's powerful and can be destructive. You can utter the simplest of words, the smallest of phrases, and those things can destroy years of friendship. They can destroy a marriage. It can destroy family dynamics. It can destroy your reputation. It can destroy trust in a moment. And James says, we got to get it under control. We got to concentrate on, instead of burning people down, we need to build people up. Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen, that the people who hear your words actually benefit from it. That you're speaking in such a way that it lifts people up, and even if it's some things in their lives they need to work on or do differently, that they feel encouraged to do that and not criticized or judged for not doing it. We need to be a people who constantly, through the words that come out of our mouths, need to constantly be building each other up, building our kids up, building our spouses up, building our families up, and our co-workers, lifting up those managers and employers above us, building them up instead of burning them down. You'll be amazed how your world, your life will change if that becomes your habit. Let's not be ones who tear down and destroy. Let's be ones who build up and help. Now, come back to our original question this morning. When people hear the words that come out of your mouth, do they think golden apples? Or do they think beating? Maybe you need to find a golden apple and just keep it on your desk at work. Maybe you need to keep one in the living room. Maybe you need to keep one on the dresser. Wherever you find yourself using words that often destroy and tear down instead of building up, to remind yourself, I want people, when they hear me, when I speak to them, I want them to be built up. I want them to appreciate what it is I have to say. Because their lives will be changed because of it. And mine will too. This sermon this morning is not one of those, evangelistic kind of sermons. I don't know that you would describe the sermon this morning as something that's just life-altering. But maybe it's something that you haven't thought of in a while. Maybe it's something to be reminded of. What are my words doing? How are the way that I say things, the words that I use and the way that I use them, how is that affecting the people in my life? How is it affecting me? And if something needs to change, if something needs to be different, if you recognize just this handful of speech hacks that we went through, if you recognize that any one of those is going to be difficult for you, I would invite you, in a moment when we stand together and sing a song, I would invite you to come forward and say, I know this is going to be hard. I know that I've hurt people, maybe people in this room, because of the words that I've said or the way that I've said them. And I've said it in arrogance, and they've been hurt, and I've even thought to myself, well, that's their problem for not hearing me right. And I need forgiveness, and I need grace, and I need to extend that to other people. There's no judgment here. And if that's what's on your heart, we want to pray for you and do whatever we can to help you. If our speech would improve, our homes would improve, our schools would improve, our community would improve. This church would be an amazing place to be if we worked on our words. So let's do that together. And if we can help you do that, we want to. If you have any need, please come forward and share it with us while together we stand and sing.